Even great players sometimes take a bit of time to settle into life at a new club. Didier Drogba only scored 10 Premier League goals in his first season at Chelsea, having been signed for a then enormous £24 million from Marseille, before going on to be named as Chelsea's greatest player of all time in a poll of more than 20,000 fans. Luka Modric was named as the worst signing of the season by Spanish newspaper Marca following a difficult debut campaign at Real Madrid, before going on to rack up more than 500 appearances and win 24 trophies, as well as a Ballon d'Or at the Bernabeu. And David De Gea was sensationally dropped by Manchester United and replaced by Anders Lindegaard during his first season at Old Trafford, having struggled initially with the physicality of the league, before going on to win more Manchester United Player of the Year awards than any other player in the club's illustrious history, which has been blessed with some of the greatest players of all time. Perhaps the most extraordinary example of all, though, is Jamie Vardy, who contemplated quitting football entirely following his debut campaign at Leicester City, having only managed to score 4 goals in the Championship as the most expensive player ever signed from the non-league game, only to be convinced otherwise and fire Leicester to promotion, followed by a Premier League title, and he now sits third in the club's all-time scoring charts. We hear this a lot about new signings. Sometimes it can take a season just to adapt to new surroundings, which can often involve acquainting oneself with a new league, language, country and culture. There are some players who laugh in the face of those excuses though, hitting the ground running in the most extraordinary fashion imaginable. In his first season at Real Madrid, having been signed for a world record-breaking fee from Juventus, Zinedine Zidane made 15 assists and scored 12 goals from midfield in the Spanish capital, including possibly the greatest Champions League final goal of all time, to see Madrid crowned as European champions for the 9th time. In his first season at Barcelona, and indeed his first season playing senior team football for any club, Sergio Busquets usurped Yaya Touré to instantly become the best pivot on the planet, playing a pivotal role, get it, in arguably the greatest team ever assembled, as they won a historic treble. Oh, and in his first season at Swansea City, having been signed for just £2 million from Rayo Vallecano, Spanish attacking midfielder cum striker Michu set the Premier League ablaze, scoring 18 league goals and 22 in all competitions, prompting Sir Alex Ferguson to comment that he should have sacked his entire scouting department for failing to identify him as a target. In terms solely of goal scoring, Robin van Persie scored 30 goals in 48 games in his first season at Manchester United. Fernando Torres struck 33 times in 46 games in his first season at Liverpool. Andrei Shevchenko found the back of the net 29 times in 43 games for AC Milan. Jimmy Greaves netted 30 times in only 31 matches after arriving at Tottenham. Gerd Muller pounced 39 times in just 32 appearances in his first season at Bayern. And, get a load of this, Josip Bitsan scored 44 goals in 17 games in his first season at FC Vitskovica. So, just the 2.6 goals per game on average for Bitsan in his debut campaign then. All of those, plus a whole lot more to be mentioned later on, came mightily close to featuring in this 7, but ultimately just missed out. And I should point out that it has to be literally a player's first season at a club, not just their first full, whole, or breakout campaigns. Pelé, for example, scored 41 goals in 38 games in his first full season at Santos as a 16-year-old. Meanwhile, Eusebio's first season at Benfica, first full season I should say, heralded 29 goals in 31 games. But in both instances, they made 1 or 2 appearances for Santos and Benfica respectively in the previous season, thus invalidating their remarkable aforementioned campaigns. It's harsh, but rules are rules, and it gets a bit messy trying to define a debut campaign otherwise. Without further ado then, who had a very promising debut campaign at DC United, but not quite good enough to feature, here are 7 of the greatest debut seasons in the entire history of football. 7th, Sergio Aguero at Manchester City. This 7 was so absurdly competitive that I wouldn't even dream of calling it a definitive list, not least because of how many times I changed my own mind just when I was planning it. But ultimately, I decided that Sergio Aguero simply had to feature. The reason being, principally at least, because I'm not really sure what more the Argentine could have done. From the get-go, his debut campaign at Man City was ludicrously brilliant. On his debut, Aguero came on as a 59th minute substitute against Swansea City, and within 9 minutes, he had already scored his first goal for the club. Moments later, he had his first assist, this time turning provider to the benefit of David Silva. In injury time, Aguero rounded off his sweet debut by hitting one of the sweetest strikes that you'll ever see from 30 yards out and planting it into the bottom corner of Michel Vorm's net. That special debut, among the finest in Premier League history, despite coming off the bench, set the tone for what was to come. Aguero scored 8 goals in his first 5 Premier League appearances, averaging a goal once every 41 minutes. Maintaining that level of output would have made Aguero by far the most prolific and high-scoring footballer to have ever existed, and whilst he didn't quite manage that, he would become the most prolific goalscorer, on a per-minute and per-game basis, that the Premier League has ever seen, at least until Erling Haaland came along. Over the course of the season as a whole, Aguero scored 30 goals and made 12 assists in 48 appearances, which included, of course, his most famous goal of all, against Queen's Park Rangers, which won Manchester City their first top-flight league title since the 1960s in the most extraordinary fashion. In terms of performance, output, and indeed the outcome of it all, of course, it was an almost flawless debut campaign, and therefore it surely has to feature. 6th, N'Golo Kante at Leicester City. It's a very recent and a very Premier League-centric start to this 7, admittedly, but I don't think including Sergio Aguero or N'Golo Kante's debut campaigns at Man City and Leicester City can be dismissed as recency bias. Some may even argue that they feature too low down. With a lot of great debut seasons, as in the case of Aguero, Torres, Gullit or Tevez, we are talking about players who arrive with enormous expectations and typically massive price tags. And though they may have exceeded those expectations, no one was all that shocked to discover that they were world-class players. In the case of N'Golo Kante, by contrast, he arrived at Leicester City in the summer of 2015 to little fanfare for a modest fee and with an even more modest set of expectations. Aged 24, Kante had only just got his first taste of top-flight football for Cannes in France the season before joining the Foxes, and he faced the daunting prospect of replacing Esteban Cambiasso, a Champions League winning former Argentina international who won Leicester City's Player of the Year award in their great escape the previous season. The fact that so little was known of Kante among most people, and even less expected of him, made his debut campaign, if not the greatest of all time, after all, I've put it in 6th, then quite possibly the most remarkable. Of course, Leicester won the Premier League title in Kante's first season at the King Power Stadium as 5,000-1 outsiders. That was probably the single greatest upset in the entire history of club football, and Kante, I would argue, ahead of even Riyad Mahrez and Jamie Vardy, was the Foxes' single most important player in that fairy tale campaign. Extraordinarily, if this was a list of the 25 or 30 greatest debut seasons of all time, Kante may well have featured twice. His sensational debut campaign at Leicester was also his only season at Leicester, preceding a £32 million move to Chelsea. Though the Blues had finished all the way down in 10th the previous season, 31 points behind the Foxes, in Kante's debut campaign, they too won the Premier League title, finishing 49 points above Leicester. That is an 80-point swing in the space of just 12 months, and while I'm not suggesting that was solely down to Kante, he certainly played a pivotal role in it. The Frenchman made the PFA Team of the Year in his debut campaigns at both Leicester and Chelsea, in addition to winning Leicester City's Players' Player of the Year and Chelsea's Players' Player of the Year awards in successive campaigns. The shock value of his first season at Leicester, though, combined with the huge role that he played in such a monumental achievement, is enough to earn him a spot in 6th. 5th, Romario at Vasco da Gama. Speaking of players who had multiple sensational debut campaigns, Brazilian legend Romario might just have had more than anyone else. In his first season in Europe with PSV, aged 21 to 22, Romario scored 26 goals in 34 games, topping the Eredivisie and KNVB Cup scoring charts as PSV won the double, and being named as the Dutch Footballer of the Year. In his first and only full season at Barcelona, Romario scored 30 goals in 33 La Liga appearances and 32 goals in all competitions, topping the La Liga scoring charts as Barca won the league and winning the FIFA World Player of the Year award. Had the Ballon d'Or been open to non-Europeans at the time, Romario would have won that as well, as France Football admitted with their Nouveau Palmarès in 2016. In his first season at Flamengo, Romario scored 37 goals in 46 games, though the team somehow still went trophyless. In his second debut campaign back at Flamengo, he scored 35 times in 36 games, again winning nothing other than the Campeonato Carioca Golden Boot. And in his first season at Fluminense, Romario scored 16 goals in 26 games, winning the Campeonato Brasileiro Player of the Year award. Remarkably though, it is none of those debut campaigns that earn Romario a spot in this 7. Instead, it is his debut campaign back at Vasco da Gama in 2000, which is where it had all begun for the Brazilian icon in 1985, that very deservedly features in 5th. Age 34, it would be fair to say that Romario returned to Vasco with a bit of a bang, featuring, at times, alongside fellow mercurial talent Edmundo, with whom he shared a mutual hatred on a personal level. On the pitch, the two created poetry in motion. Edmundo spent part of that season on loan at Santos, but Romario made an incredible 71 appearances for his boyhood club, scoring 66 goals in all competitions. It was enough to win Vasco both the Campeonato Brasileiro Serie A title and the short-lived Copa Mercosa, which was a competition between the best teams in both Brazil and Argentina. On an individual level, Romario won the Campeonato Brasileiro Golden Boot, as well as picking up Vasco, the Brasileiro, Brazil, and South America's Footballer of the Year awards in a clean sweep. Incredibly, Romario rejoined Vasco for a third and then a fourth time in 2005 and 2007, aged 39 and 41, scoring 30 goals in 41 games, followed by 15 goals in 19 games, and in between that, he had his memorable debut campaign at Fluminense and scored 19 goals in 26 games in his first and only season playing for Miami FC. If this was a list of the players with the most great debut campaigns, Romario would be the strong favourite. His greatest of all, meanwhile, namely the 2000 season at Vasco da Gama, is enough for him to take 5th. 4th, Kenny Dalglish at Liverpool. Forget about Mohamed Salah, Billy Liddell or Jay Spearing. Kenny Dalglish is the greatest Liverpool player of all time, and his debut campaign at Anfield was among the finest that the sport has ever seen. A bit like N'Golo Kante with Esteban Cambiasso, but to an even greater extent, Dalglish faced the daunting prospect of replacing Kevin Keegan at Liverpool, who had just joined Hamburg for a British record fee, having been the Red Star man in a European Cup and First Division double-winning team the previous season. Unlike Kante, Dalglish wasn't an unknown quantity. He was already a superstar at Celtic, but Liverpool needed him to make an instant impact, and boy did he do just that. In his debut campaign, Dalglish made an astonishing 62 appearances, owing to Liverpool's cup runs and the fact that he started every single one of their 42 league games. Dalglish averaged a goal every other game, finding the back of the net 31 times from a withdrawn role, typically playing just off David Fairclough, in addition to hitting double figures in terms of assists as well. It was a monumental debut campaign, going above and beyond anything that even Keegan had done in a Liverpool shirt, and he topped it all off by scoring the only goal, and therefore the winning goal, as Liverpool beat Club Brugge 1-0 in the European Cup final at Wembley Stadium. Dalglish's contribution went far beyond mere goals and assists though. He was a talismanic figure, freakishly talented, and set the tone for a world-class Liverpool team right from the front. His superb debut campaign, which was quite possibly the finest of his enormously decorated career as a whole, saw Dalglish pick up the FWA Footballer of the Year award, and quite frankly, I think that he was very unfortunate not to win the Ballon d'Or. Criminally, despite Liverpool winning the First Division and the European Cup, and Dalglish being the star player in both competitions, he only finished 10th. The winner, well, doubly cruelly, that was the man that he replaced at Liverpool, Kevin Keegan. 3rd, Erling Haaland at Manchester City. Erling Haaland might not quite be in Romario territory just yet, but for a man of his age, still only 23, he has already had tremendous starts for a number of different clubs. Following 29 goals in 27 games for Red Bull Salzburg, Haaland scored 16 goals in 18 games in his first half season at Borussia Dortmund, and 41 goals in 41 games in his first full campaign at the Westfalenstadion. The debut campaign that earns Haaland a podium place in this seven, though, quite obviously, is his first season at Manchester City. Again, there were high expectations of Haaland given what he had already achieved and the number of goals that he'd scored, and, though still a bargain, he didn't exactly come cheap, signed for his €60 million release clause. Almost everyone expected Haaland to be in Premier League Golden Boot contention, except for Rory Jennings, but the previous season, that had only meant scoring 23 goals. Haaland, by contrast, scored 36 goals in 35 Premier League games and 52 goals in 53 games in all competitions. In doing so, he broke Andy Cole and Alan Shearer's records in terms of the most league goals scored in a single season during the Premier League era. In addition to firing Manchester City not just to the Premier League title, but also the FA Cup and a first ever UEFA Champions League crown. Haaland, just for what it's worth, scored 12 goals in 11 games in Europe. Season highlights included hat-tricks against Crystal Palace, Nottingham Forest, Manchester United, Wolves and Burnley. He also set a record for the most hat-tricks in a season during the Premier League era. A 5-goal haul inside of 35 minutes against RB Leipzig in the Champions League, and goals in both quarter-final legs against Bayern Munich. He even chipped in with 9 assists. Haaland won the European Golden Shoe, the Premier League Golden Boot, the UEFA Champions League Golden Boot, the FWA Footballer of the Year Award, the Premier League Young Player of the Season Award, the Premier League Player of the Season Award, the PFA Players Player of the Year Award, the UEFA Men's Player of the Year Award, and he came second in Ballon d'Or voting, only missing out on that award because Lionel Messi won the World Cup. As the star man, breaking numerous goal-scoring records, in a team that won a historic and incredibly rare treble, it would be difficult not to rank Haaland's debut campaign among the greatest in the history of the sport. Second, Johan Cruyff at Barcelona. It was absolutely brutal, keeping this one off top spot. Johan Cruyff's debut campaign at Barcelona isn't just one of the best first seasons that a player has ever had at a new club, it is one of the best seasons that a player has ever had full stop. Following 9 seasons starring for Ajax, during which time he had inspired his boyhood club to 3 successive European Cups, winning 2 Ballon d'Ors as their star man in the process, Cruyff had already firmly established himself as the best player on the planet before joining Barca, and it came as no surprise that he commanded a world record-breaking fee, almost doubling the previous record in fact, which had stood for the last 5 years. Barca and Cruyff now appears to have been a match made in heaven, but not everyone saw it that way at the time. Not since the 1959-60 season, 13 years before Cruyff arrived, had Barcelona last won the La Liga title, and the previous season had seen the club dumped out of the UEFA Cup in the first round, following a 4-1 thrashing at the hands of Porto. Cruyff was leaving the best team in Europe then, fresh off the back of 3 straight European Cups, to join a team that hadn't even competed in the European Cup for more than a decade. Reunited with his old comrade and head coach Rinus Michels, Cruyff absorbed the collective weight of Catalan expectations, immersed himself deeply into the local life, language and culture of the region, and set about transforming a wounded giant. The end result was one of the most unprecedented, complete, and flawless campaigns that the game has ever seen. Cruyff joined Barca a few games into the season, and the club had made a pretty torrid start. In fact, 6 games into the campaign, they found themselves in the relegation zone, with only 1 win to their name. As historian Jimmy Burns noted though, with Cruyff, the team felt they couldn't lose. And invariably, they were right to think just that. With Cruyff in the team, Barcelona only lost 2 games all season, and those were 2 of their last 3 games, by which point the turnaround was already complete, and Barcelona's first La Liga title in 14 years had been secured. In 26 appearances, Cruyff scored 16 goals, none of them penalties, and made 16 assists, averaging better than 1.3 goal contributions per game, a goal or an assist once every 72 minutes on average, and being directly involved in almost 50% of all of Barcelona's goals. Cruyff's greatest moment in a Barcelona shirt was his virtuoso display against Real Madrid, in which he scored and made 2 assists in a historic 5-0 win, which remains one of the most iconic El Clasicos of all time. For his efforts, Cruyff deservedly won a 3rd Ballon d'Or. 0. Honourable mentions. I mentioned a whole raft of them during the introduction, and in fact, there were so many that I discovered when researching this video that I've actually been radicalised into no longer buying the need a season to settle in narrative. If you're good enough, buckle up and get straight involved. There's no excuses. What do you mean it's too cold and you can't understand Scouse? If you don't win at least 3 individual accolades in your debut campaign at a club and score a goal or an assist every game, what exactly are you playing at? I don't care if you're a goalkeeper. Get on with it. I'll start with maybe the most notable omission, given its recency and the demographics of my audience, which is probably Mohamed Salah's first season at Liverpool. Salah scored 44 goals in 52 games in a bewilderingly brilliant campaign in which it felt as though he scored in every game, and he very nearly featured. His first season at Anfield was just about neck and neck with Kante and Aguero's at Leicester and Man City, as far as I was concerned, along with a few others it should be said. And therefore, the fact that Kante's performances contributed to the most unlikely Premier League title win of all time, and Aguero's to Man City's first title since the 60s, and the beginning of their era of dominance, including the goal and moment that won that title, just about edged them in front of him, given that Salah won nothing. Elsewhere, and I won't go through them all, Eric Cantona's first season at Manchester United, in which he arrived midway through the season before inspiring them to their first title since the 60s, a bit like Aguero at Man City. Christian Vieri's first and only season at Atletico Madrid, in which he scored 29 goals in 32 games. Ruud van Nistelrooy's stunning start to life at Manchester United. Ferenc Puskas and Alfredo Di Stefano's instant impacts at Real Madrid, especially the transformational powers of the latter. Ruud Hullit's 27-goal debut season at PSV, John Charles and Omar Savori's starts to life at Juventus, in the same season no less, Denis Law's prolific season at Manchester United, Ronaldinho at Barcelona, Diego Milito at Inter Milan, Diego Maradona at Boca Juniors, Zico at Udinese, Michel Platini at both Juventus and Saint-Etienne, both Gerard Piqué and Dani Alves, again in the same season no less, along with Sergio Busquets at Barcelona, Roberto Baggio at Juventus, and Silvio Piola at Torino, where he scored a pretty alright 27 goals in only 23 games, could just as easily have featured. Salah, Di Stefano, Charles, Milito, Zidane and Platini came especially close to featuring. But ultimately, several great debut seasons had to miss out. I don't claim this 7 was definitive, as I said, it's just a bit of fun, though I did spend an unjustifiably long time thinking about it. And before I leave you all, there is still the small matter of our top spot. First, Ronaldo at Barcelona. From a very recent and Premier League-centric start to a not quite as recent and very Barcelona-centric end, Ronaldo Luis Nazario de Lima's one and only season at Barcelona is among the greatest peaks that any footballer has ever reached, and that is not remotely overstating things. Though he was still only 19 years old at the time of his arrival for a world record-breaking fee from PSV, I would contest that Ronaldo's season at Barca was the best season that he ever had, and a testament to the fact that, were it not for injuries, he would have gone down as a genuine candidate for the title of the greatest footballer of all time. Everybody knew that Ronaldo was special before arriving at Barcelona. He had already scored 44 goals in 47 games for Cruzeiro and 54 goals in 57 games for PSV before turning 20 years old. But just how good he was when playing at the very highest level, as the balance of power in world football had already begun to shift firmly towards Europe, nothing could quite have prepared anyone for the sight of Ronaldo with a ball at his feet. Lightning quick, both in a straight line and with a ball at his feet, Ronaldo's technique was effortless, unpredictable, and impossible to defend against. He made the best defenders in the world look as though they had 2 left feet, and by the time they realised what he'd done, he was already 10 yards away from them. Ronaldo scored 47 goals in 49 games in his first and only season in Catalonia, but in reality, it could easily have been 60 or 70. And if there was one criticism that could be levelled at him that season, it was that he wasn't as prolific as he could have been, given the sheer number of chances that he created for himself, tearing teams open time and time again. Factor in his 13 assists, and it was 60 goal contributions in 49 games, or 1 every 70 minutes, in Ronaldo's first season at one of the biggest clubs in the world, aged 19 and 20. Barcelona won a treble of sorts, the Copa del Rey, the Spanish Super Cup, and the UEFA Cup Winners' Cup that season. Meanwhile, Ronaldo won the Pichichi Trophy, the European Golden Shoe, the FIFA World Player of the Year award, and the Ballon d'Or. The following season, Ronaldo was signed for another world record-breaking fee for the second time in only 2 seasons, this time moving to Inter Milan where, after less than 18 months, his kneecap effectively exploded. Ronaldo not only returned to football, which had at one stage appeared unlikely, he became the best player in the world again, probably for a period of 2 to 3 years, between 2002 and 2005. It spoke to Ronaldo's freakish ability that, even as a shadow of his former self, and stripped of that truly electric pace, he was still the best player on the planet. But in the mid to late 90s, especially at Barcelona, he was unlike almost anything that the sport has ever seen, either before or since. That is it for today's video, but thank you all very much as ever for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to hit the like button if that was the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and it goes without saying, of course, that you should be subscribed and have notifications turned on for both this channel, HITC Sevens, and also my second channel, Alfie Potsama, both of which should be about to appear on your screens now, along with a couple of videos that you might enjoy watching after this one. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads via the username at HITC Sevens on all 3, should you wish to do so, and all of those links plus a whole lot more should be down in the video description below. Cheers.